There are three monitors and guarantors to this agreement. It's Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. This agreement became possible now because of what I call the Trump effect. It's very difficult for Bibi Netanyahu to say no to President-elect, soon-to-be President Trump. He fears the consequences of saying no to him, all sorts of needs that the Israelis will still have. He finds it difficult to say no to him, and he knows the Israeli public looks at Trump as being fundamentally favorable towards Israel. So he will explain this agreement in terms of President Trump insists on it, number one. But this is what gets to the issue of, will this really lead to the end of the war? And my answer is yes, it will, because the US, meaning the Trump administration, because they own this agreement. You saw the credit that President Trump took today. He called this an epic agreement. So
Absolutely.
they're now a guarantor that will be implemented. And if Bibi finds it hard to say no to him to do the deal, I think he will also find no to him not to carry it out. The only way this doesn't happen is if Hamas decides to violate the terms of the agreement. That could happen, but I don't think it's in Hamas's interest to violate the terms of the agreement.
Yeah, Donald Trump was taking credit for this and saying that's because he's coming into office, and there's a sense that that Hamas knows that he's willing to drop the hammer and side almost wholly with Israel in what it should choose to do. But all of the negotiations preceding it were Biden administration negotiations, which presumably were subtler. There are things like conditions that 3 hostages will be released within 48 to 72 hours of the agreement, along with unknown numbers of Palestinian prisoners. Are you concerned that because this took so long to take shape and there's so many subtleties and nuance, that that will be lost in the new administration and whatever shifts in the agreement it might choose to pursue?
Well, it's a very good question because this is actually a very long agreement. Uh, it may be 100 pages in length. So obviously there's not just a lot of detail, there's a lot of subtlety built into it. That said, there was a thorough briefing of the incoming negotiator, Steve Witkoff, and he flew to Doha to be part of the negotiations. He flew from Doha to Jerusalem on Saturday and effectively told Prime Minister Netanyahu he had to say yes. So I think that, in fact, there is an awareness, at least of Witkoff and the people who'll be working with him. I think there's, as I said, they're guarantors of this agreement now. You can't claim it's yours and then you're not responsible for fulfilling. One of the agreements is that you're a guarantor. Egypt and Qatar couldn't put pressure on Hamas. And by the way, what moved Hamas in the end were two things. One was they were isolated. They no longer had Hezbollah. The Assad regime was gone. The Iranians have been dramatically weakened. The whole ring of fire around Israel, the axis of resistance, basically has been transformed, if not eliminated. And so they were alone. But that also made them more vulnerable to pressure from Qatar and Egypt, both of whom wanted to prove to President Trump that they would get things done for him because he made it clear he wanted this done before he was inaugurated.